Good morning to you. This is Scott Armstrong from Courageous Career Adventures, and welcome to our latest episode and podcast. Today, a very cool day. It's always a cool day here, but particularly today, I'm welcoming Jane and Michael Blaufus from the Blaufus Group, who have a story, a courageous career transition adventure that probably, did it begin separately, guys, or was it together? Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Scott.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. It began separately. Michael, why don't you start? Because you're the one who stepped off the corporate bus first.
I stepped off the corporate bus in 2007. I left a career in transportation and I guess had a second thoughts and going, I'm not happy with what I'm doing, and decided I wanted to pound nails for a living and started up a renovation company.
So you started a renovation company. Tell me, what our audience is folks who've made a transition, who are contemplating a transition as well. So what was the itch that you had to scratch to make that career transition?
You know, it was a case of not being happy, not feeling fulfilled at the end of the day. There's something about seeing your work being, a sense of accomplishment at the end of the day. And as we all know, and a lot of times in the corporate world, you can go days, weeks, months, maybe even a year before something settles and is completed and moves forward. So with that being said, I just got fed up. I like to build. It was a second trade of mine and became quite successful, actually.
You did.
Very good. And I'm going to ask Jane for you to fill in your piece there too. But before I do that, Michael, obviously you left the corporate world. You went to, as you said, pounding nails, and now you're in another tier, another job. So we're going to catch that transition again here. But
exactly.
Here's a question I love to ask our guests. How long did that itch incubate before you took action?
Oh, quite a while.
A couple of years.
A couple of years that it was a strong itch before we moved forward with it. But it had been there a long time.
Okay.
Years.
And was there sort of a precipitating event that said, I'm going to take it from this uncomfortable feeling and I'm going to actually act on it? Or was it just a slow buildup?
No, actually, I was working for a transportation company. I was the director of sales, and they were going through some issues.
And a reorg.
And I got reorged right out of, they eliminated their Canadian sales force.
Okay.
And so consequently, I'm sitting there with no job, and, what better time to do something than right then and there.
What a great attitude. Now, sitting to your right is your wife, Jane. And Jane and I met last December in Ottawa as a member of CAPS, the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. Jane is simply amazing. Jane, before speaking, same kind of questions. What were you doing? And then later on, what was your sort of itch that you had to scratch?
Well, I had a very good career in the financial services industry. I started out as an advisor, became a manager, and then became a corporate head office executive. And so I was doing some pretty big stuff running the Salesforce training divisions for 3 of Canada's largest life insurance companies. And I was with one of them. I'd been there for a while, and things changed. And I went from absolutely jumping out of bed in the morning, I couldn't wait to get to work, to trying to figure out every way, can we have a snow day? Oh, I hope I get a flat tire. I started realizing that my raison d'etre was gone, my passion was gone. And I just kept thinking, Scott, there has to be more to life than this. Like, I can't go the rest of my career unhappy. So here's a perfect example. I had foot surgery and had to be off work for 8 weeks. And the week before I was supposed to go back to work, I, in the dark, slammed my foot into a solid wooden ottoman in the living room. And I was hanging off the curtains. I'm surprised somebody didn't call 911 because my husband was, doing me in or something. I was screaming so loud. But I was happy when the doctor told me I had to stay off work for another week.
Good indicator there.
Yeah, it was a great indicator. So we were going through, does that answer your question?
It does. And I was just going to add a sort of a deeper bore beetle on this one. Are you an impatient person, Jane?
Me, I can be and I cannot be.
Okay.
But I
Depending
think
on the situation?
my husband's probably going to tell you I'm an impatient person.
No, I would agree that it's both ways. It depends on the situation.
Okay. And Jane, how about Michael? Is Michael relatively patient, or is he one too to constantly look for new horizons?
He has the patience of Job.
Okay. So in terms of the catalyst event, you were probably one who helps precipitate some change here?
In my own world, yes, but not in Michael's. Michael was totally responsible for his own. We sat down at dinner one Sunday night after everything he described to you happened. And over dinner, I said, what do you really want to do? Who do you want to be when you grow up? And that's when he looked at me and he said, I want to pound nails.
Yeah.
I said, okay, what does that mean? And, so we said, okay, let's do it.
So let's go back to that poor foot that got smashed by the wood in the room there. You now don't get to go back to work as you wanted. What happened after that?
Michael and I had some really deep conversations, and I said, this isn't working. I'm not happy. And I was also in a situation where we were going through a major reorganization in our area. And I was working with a new vice president, and I was in a position that really wasn't, satisfying my soul. And so Michael and I had a conversation, and I said, I'd like to go in and talk to her about what my opportunities may or may not be. And I'm thinking that if they might be open to giving me a package, I wouldn't be insulted. Mm-hmm. So we looked at our situation and said, okay, we can do this. So I went in and I had a conversation with my boss.
Okay.
Go
so
ahead.
Sort of a proactive approach to that.
Yep.
Okay. And the conversation with your boss obviously was not what you wanted long-term. And is this when you sort of decided to take the step?
I realized that it wasn't going to fit in with what I wanted. And she also understood that there were some politics going on that I wasn't aware of. And I said, if you've ever considered giving me or offering me a package, I said, I wouldn't be insulted, which she nearly fell off the chair. She was not expecting that.
Yeah.
So I basically reorged myself out with a package.
Very cool. And this is one of those questions you can dance aside. You don't have to answer it. But when you're contemplating this new future, the both of you, can you give it a ballpark range for our listeners here as to what stage you were at in your careers to make such a gutsy decision?
We were both making well into the six figures. Mm-hmm. And, Michael had stepped off the corporate bus the year before, and here was I looking at stepping off the year after. And, you go from two very solid paychecks that are in your bank account every second week to, whoa, here's, you're on the roller coaster. But I think one of the things I'd like to make sure that I touch upon here, Scott, is there was a significant reason why we were able to do what we did. Mm-hmm. And it was the fact that we had our ducks in a row.
Yeah.
We had, a lot of people can't have two people move out of corporate because one often has to stay because somebody needs to have a benefits plan. You have to have, medical, dental, yep, and all that kind of stuff. Well, we had our own life insurance. We had all of our things that we needed in place, which allowed us, we were financially secure. We had, done some very significant things in terms of savings and finance and personal stuff. So we were able to take that step.
So what if, Jane and Michael, what if you hadn't these things lined up? Because, some of the listeners here are not going to be in the same situation. Would you have taken the leap, or would it have taken a greater pressure point to move you to that place?
I personally think we both probably wouldn't have taken that step.
Yeah.
It would have been one or the other,
yeah,
but it wouldn't have been both of us.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, how is it working together? And so now you're running the Blaufus group together, yes?
Yes.
How long have you been doing that?
Full time, we've been doing it for about a year and a half now.
Yeah.
And you were still doing your renovation company and working with me at night and on the weekends. But full time, it's We closed
year and a
it.
half.
Yeah, we closed down your company, and Michael's basically been full-time with me since then.
Very good. And so Michael joined you, Jane, in the process. Michael, I've also been in that situation where, a spouse and I have worked together on a business and whatnot. Can you share some stories of things that people should consider if they're going to work with their significant other on a business? Some of the things that should probably be in place.
First and foremost, you better be able to get along.
Mm-hmm.
It's because,
by the way, listeners, Jane is chuckling by the microphone as he said this.
I mean, you have to, that's first and foremost.
You have to like each other.
You have to like each other. You have to be able to spend 24/7, week after week with each other, excluding going off to the grocery store or something of that nature, and still get along and be happy and go to bed happy and get up and eager and go after it the next day. That's first and foremost. Everything else seems with us has really found its own grounds. She has her responsibilities. I have my responsibilities. I think our corporate background really has helped set that standard.
Mm-hmm.
So,
talk about respect, respecting each other too, because I'm sure, Michael, you're making decisions sometimes that Jane would, give pause for thought and vice versa. Where's respect, fitting into this so that the relationship really works well together?
Well, that's first and foremost. I mean, I'm not always right, neither is she, but together with our experience, we're going to come up with a solution. That's not to say that we don't disagree. We do. We go around in circles, but at the end of the day, it's what's going to be best this is business, and what's going to be best for the company.
Mm-hmm. So what's your resolution dispute technique? I mean, you both are at opposite ends of an issue here. And a lot of, people get into this with partners, let alone spouses. You've got to look at each other at the dinner table as you close the door and go out at night. How do you resolve it so that it's done?
I'll take that one.
Go ahead.
Well, we have a rule in this house that we never let the sun set on our wrath. So we never go to bed if there's an issue hanging between us.
Sometimes we're up late at night.
Yeah, sometimes we're up late, but don't spit out your coffee there, Scott. But, and are we saying we're perfect? By no means are we perfect. We've gone at each other at loggerheads sometimes. But the thing is it goes back to what Michael said, is that we like each other, we love each other, we have respect for each other. And the thing that's the most important to us, first and foremost, is our relationship and our marriage. So because of that respect, we try very hard to be aware of each other's opinions, points of view, feelings, but sometimes we have had a couple of very serious discussions. Sometimes my darling husband refers to me often as a rubber ball in a box, because I'm the creative one, so I get 9 million different ideas and I can change my mind in 30 seconds, if not less. Michael's the grounding one, so sometimes he has to grab me by the seat of the pants and haul me down off the ceiling. But it works. Yeah. And because of our past history also, we know how important our relationship is, and that's paramount in this house and home and business.
Fair enough. So Jane, you've been speaking now how long? How long ago was it you left the corporate world?
I left the corporate world in October of 2008, but I'd done quite a bit of speaking during my career, but it was always on a corporate perspective or for an organization. But I released my first book in December of 2011, and my speaking career sort of dovetailed with that and took off in 2012.
And can you tell us the name of the book?
The name of the book is With the Stroke of a Pen, Claim Your Life. And it's all about helping people to get their personal and financial lives in order while they can.
Yeah. And just for listeners here, I've had the pleasure, and it has been a pleasure, of sitting down with Jane. And I thought I knew my pennies and my cents and dimes, and Jane pointed out a lot of things. So it is, a great read to make sure that your financial house is in order. And some of it's just such common sense. And Jane, if they wanted to get a hold of your book, Amazon, I'm sure, is there any other place?
Amazon, we're just in the throes of getting it up on Amazon, but I'd like to offer your readers, your listeners today, if they'd like to order it, they can order it directly off the website at Jane Blaufus, BLAUFUS.com. And if they'd like, they can use the promo code 3, number 3, and capital E. And for your listeners, we'll offer a 20% special pricing.
Oh, that's great. And what I'll do is on the website where we post this, I will put that information in the text box below the podcast so that we can do that. So getting to that place, you 2008, Michael, you sort of left the transportation. You had your construction company. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the timeline. And also for the last year or so, you've been full time as the Blaufus Group together. Exactly. Michael, tell me about new skills or new respect for skills that have been needed to execute your role there. First of all, just tell us what your role is with Jane. Jane is a speaker, and your role is everything else underneath?
Well, my title is I'm the VP of everything else. Mm-hmm. And basically what that means is Jane speaks, she writes, she coaches, and I do everything else. Mm-hmm. In regards to the back side of the operation, booking, follow-up paperwork, dealing with the bookkeepers, the accountants, the lawyers, that type of thing.
So what have you learned? What's in the last year? I mean, the biggest thing that you've sort of gone, wow, I didn't see that coming. I'm so glad I can do that now.
That's an interesting question. I've been so tied into the business that there wasn't really a lot of surprises in that regard because I was still in the business from day one. But we do, we have more outsourcing, I would say, in regards to, we have a VA that really does a lot of the things. Yeah. All the social media.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's a huge part of the business is the social media side of it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Tell me about then, a Yahoo moment, and either one of you can take this one. You've been to business together now, and you just go, man, that was sort of one of the best, business moments I've ever had. Just, it may have been a contract, a book. It may have been something I'm not even aware of.
One thing that jumps into my mind is, I think one of our, aha moments was when we published the book is now in its 3rd edition, but I was working with a coach when I wrote the book and released it the first time. So I just basically did everything my coach told me to do. But when it came around for 2nd edition, we said, before we just go down this alley again and blindly, maybe we need to do some due diligence and do some checking around.
Good point.
And we did, and we found a new printer and cut our printing costs in half and saved ourselves a whack of money. Yeah. And we went, aha, just because, you do it that way doesn't mean you got to do it that way moving forward. So I think one of the aha moments, or we've had a few aha moments about, just because somebody tells you to do it this way doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. So it's taking the bull by the horns and going out and becoming more educated.
It's almost like the cost of tuition. Mm-hmm. It's the way I look at it in regards to, okay, well, that cost us X amount. We can either say,
shame on us,
or use it as that learning experience that, well, we didn't know any better to begin with, so now we do. And the second time would be shame on us.
Yes. And isn't that one of the great things about being the entrepreneur, though, as opposed to the corporate world where the processes, your standard operating procedure dictates you usually do a certain way, but now you get to create those for yourself, and they can be different each and every time.
And that's a very good point.
Yeah. So you've got those things where you're actually discussing, or discovering ways of saving money, which is really cool. How about laneways, Jane, for you as a speaker? A lot of entrepreneurs start out business with a certain target market, and then, something hits them between the eyes. They go, oh my gosh, I did not see that before.
Well, that's a really good one. And I've got the answer to that right off the tip of my tongue. So in the book, I talk to people about how to work with professionals such as a financial advisor, lawyer, accountant, and a funeral prearrangement specialist. So I thought I had 4 lanes for speaking. I thought I could speak into finance, legal,
Yeah.
accounting, and funeral. So a very good friend of mine is in the funeral industry and said, "Oh, you've got to go down to the US and speak at the National Funeral Directors Conference." So that was fine. I thought, okay, this is going to be a market for me, and there's 6,000 people going to this particular conference. And my coach encouraged me to go, and I was encouraged to be part of the trade show and the whole 9 yards. Well, the long and the short of it was, because nobody had to pre-register to hear anybody speak, I had 33 people sitting in the room that had 250 seats in it, because it was a Sunday afternoon, and everybody else was out sightseeing.
And the sun was shining.
And it was one of those ones where nobody was there to help you. You had to introduce yourself and whatever. So I pulled my poor husband up on stage. He hates speaking, and made him introduce me because I wasn't going to do both. And then we spent 3 days standing on a trade show floor. And I think if we were lucky, we sold 22 books. And by the time we were finished, we lost $10,000 doing that.
Yeah.
So that's when I knew it wasn't a lane for me, but it was my husband kept telling me, no, he kept saying, I don't know if you want to do a trade show, because of all his experience in transportation doing trade shows. But of course, I thought I had to do this.
Yeah.
So that was a lesson. So to answer your question, when I realized my lane was really financial services, because that's where I'm known. I have a huge network. I have a great reputation. When I focused back on that, things took off.
No, fair enough. And that's something for entrepreneurs. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, but it bears repeating again, is that there's a perfectionist thing that I call cancer. If you're a perfectionist, to have that as an entrepreneur is cancerous, because a lot of the times we don't launch or do something until we feel we've got it perfect. It is well worthwhile, to explore those lanes and explore them quickly to figure out whether in fact they are viable or not. When I wrote my first book, and it was in 2009, I was in Chapters Indigo, and I was happy and doing the book signings and stuff. And the best laneway for me, and my book was on entrepreneurship, was Canadian penitentiary systems.
Wow.
Because they can't have any resources outside of the prison. And it was a complete entrepreneurial workbook that could go in and talk about a choke point. They'd be ordering 400 or 500 copies every year for the inmates to work through those kinds of things. But I would have never found that if I had just kept on my blinders that this is my lane. I had to explore other things along the way. So if you are contemplating that courageous leap to a new career, it's certainly, don't sit in one lane without exploring it against public opinion too long. You did that with the financial services piece. You knew it, right? You never need to learn that lesson again. We've talked about your Yahoo moments. We've talked about some challenges. Looking back on it, are you glad you did this?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Every time I drive by the corporate building that I was working in, I think I say to myself, I'd shoot myself in the head if I had to every day, because we were each, Michael did an interim contract for a year with a client after he came out of transportation, before he actually went full bore into the construction, into the renovation. And he was driving an hour and a half each way every day to get to where he was located. And I was driving an hour each way to get to where I was located. So it was like 12 to 14 hour days and weekends, because I was bringing home work at night and on the weekends, and it was just nonstop. So no, I don't regret it. Do you, honey?
No, there is no way I would go back to that standard corporate grind.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, once you've experienced what it is to be on your own, and and shown some success that you can survive, you won't go back.
The only thing we miss is a steady paycheck, but I wouldn't trade the steady paycheck for what we have in terms of all of the other time freedom to grow, freedom to go, things to do together, travel together. I wouldn't trade it.
So a fair number of our listeners here are those who are having the itch, the desire to change. From each one of you, advice on those who are contemplating taking the leap, and things that you would suggest they think about.
On my side, because I'm more of ABC type process person,
Mm-hmm.
is to do your homework in regards, look into what it is that you want to do, the ups and downs, the positives, the negatives, and really think long and hard, because it is a big step. I mean, when you walk away from corporate or you walk away from a good paying position, no matter what it is, you're taking a leap of faith. And the other side is you have to make sure the other person in your life is right there with you and support you, because you're going to have some days where they're going to look at you and go, you really wanted to do this?
What about, Michael, and just to dig down that next level on that one, a lot of people tend to say go away from something rather than towards something. So I may have an idea or a thought for a business, but I haven't done my due diligence, my research that you were just talking about. And they may find themselves backed into a corner where they might be getting right-sized out of an organization without having done that research. Can you talk about the importance of actually taking it from just a thought, your transition thought, to having a little bit of, if I could do this kind of plan already in your back pocket?
If I understand you correctly, for me, it was, number one, I wasn't expecting them to be downsized and out the door, but it was having that passion and wanting to, had the confidence in myself that it could happen, it would happen, and it would be profitable, and I could move the business forward. There was a lot of learning curves to it, and part of it was a leap of faith on both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and I go back to what I said about Michael did have a little bit of a transition period because he had a consulting contract for a year, but while he was in the consulting contract, you did the home inspector's course. You did what you needed to do in order to get your licensing.
I had to get my licensing.
We looked into,
insurance.
all sorts of things he was going to need, trailers and this, that, and the other. And what were his responsibilities? We looked at, do we hire employees? Do we get, so he did his due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't, businesses generally are not started overnight, and you don't start with zero, end up making $1 million tomorrow. It's that learning curve in between. There's a lot of things that hit us that we weren't aware of, that I wasn't aware of in regards to, tax implications and stuff like that. That's why you bring in accountants, bookkeepers, things like that, lawyers for incorporating. So there's a learning curve in that regard, but you have to have the faith.
Yeah.
You got to have the faith, right here, and you can do it.
Yeah, Jane, I think you're really lucky to have Michael there, because he sounds like the solid foundation of taking care of all the things that aren't creative and idea generating. For you, in terms of your experience, your advice for somebody who may be a creative looking to branch out on their own.
Oh, that's a good one. I go back to my comment about he lovingly refers to me as a rubber ball in a box. I think one of the things you have to do is calm the noise in your own head, because when you are creative, you tend to have, like I said, all these ideas are spilling out, and it can get very noisy up there. So you really have to stop yourself and sit down and do some really deep soul searching and thinking. And it's, I coach clients today that are going through this, and it's get your ideas down on paper. Literally pull out a piece of paper. It's the age-old draw a T down the middle of the paper, put pros on one side, cons on the other, and just dump what's in your head out. And it's a case of really stopping and looking at what you're thinking about doing. The other thing too is I think it's really important to find what the gap is, because there's so many people out there doing so many things that you're thinking of doing. Why do you want to try to penetrate an industry that's already overwhelmed? So how do you find what your opportunity is, what the gap is? So it's really doing some investigative work as well.
Fair enough. And not only looking at gaps of today, but gaps of a year or two or three down, to Michael's point that you're starting your business for that time period and you're not starting it necessarily for today's market space.
Exactly.
Well, the other thing too, and we're really fortunate in the time that we're in, and that is there's this thing called a computer. And the information that's available to you with different companies that are out there that you can register, that you can take tutorials, you can do, and it doesn't matter whether it's a bookkeeping course on a software to learn a bookkeeping, Quicken,
Adobe to learn
Adobe,
video, whatever.
You name it, it's out there that can take you from being an amateur to an expert if you put in the time. Mm-hmm. And that time is a couple hours a day, an hour a day, 4 hours a week, whatever the case might be. We're fortunate. You don't have to go off and spend time on a job or to learn some of these trades that, tricks and in the business.
Yeah, I remember meeting Sir Richard Branson a few years ago when he opened his airline here at YVR, and I asked him, I actually did the entrepreneurial ambush when he was walking from his press conference back to his hotel. And I said, working with entrepreneurs, one piece of advice, and he said, be relentlessly curious. That you come out, Jane, of the financial realm, Michael, transportation and construction. I'm sure you're learning, each of you, all kinds of things that have nothing to do with that previous life. True to be relentlessly curious?
Yeah, totally. Because just to build on that, Scott, it's very true, because Michael has invested over close to 100 hours already in learning the whole Adobe platform, so that he now produces all our videos. And it's led to other things that we used to outsource to graphic designers and other people. So the investment of his time and some money is paying off huge dividends for us, because we're not paying thousands of dollars to somebody else to do the work, because he can do it now.
Fair enough.
It's that curiosity.
Yes.
And he's really good at that, and he's really good at digging deep. I don't go quite as deep, but I do when I'm into the middle of a project or whatever.
It's for $39 a month. I have access to literally almost everything that one would want to learn, and probably more than I want to learn, for $39 a month. So what's that, $480 a year?
Yep.
You can't go to university
and take a course.
Take a course for that amount of money.
Yeah.
And it's on my own time. It's right there on the screen in front of me.
Yeah. I'm an Adobe junkie as well. And I'll just say to our listeners, we are not affiliates of Adobe. We're not getting any money for promoting Adobe here. We're just generically commenting on the ability to learn about things online. Hey, going forward, it's 2018 as we record this. The Blaufus Group has some plans for the future. Do you care to share any of those with us?
Well, I invested last year in acquiring my E1 visa to work in the US to open a lot more doors. So a big push this year, a concentration this year, is to get a lot more bookings from a speaking perspective and workshops and whatever. I'm also looking at building an online coaching program to help people in the financial services industry. I'm in the development phase of 2 new speeches that I'm working on. One is in women and wealth, and the other is about the correlation between mental well-being and financial well-being in the workplace, because this is a very big, this whole discussion around mental health and loss of productivity and all of that. And Michael, you go ahead and share what you're working on.
Because of the success with especially a lot of her recent videos, I now have a mobile studio that I can take out to certain clientele that are looking to do, a minute, 2-minute business videos. And on top of that, I have a love of photography, or I should say my dog does. And so you can go into Tux Pics on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And you can see some of his work as he takes me across the country to go take pictures. So
we're a lot of animal lovers here, because that was my foundation as well. Tell us, what kind of dog do you have?
He is a 7-year-old black Labradoodle.
Oh, gosh.
And he's too cute for his own good and ours some days.
That he is.
Yes, and you have a good vacuum at home too, I take it.
Actually, it's not too bad because he has more of that poodle than he does lab in him. So he doesn't get quite so bad, but we are heading into warmer weather. So there'll be a few fluffs floating around.
Hey guys, thank you, Jane. Thank you, Michael, very much for joining us on Courageous Career Adventures. And again, it's the Blaufus group that you can do. You'll see it in the notes below here where you clicked on the podcast. Please don't forget Jane's offer for a 20% discount on her book. And Jane, the book's title again is?
With the Stroke of a Pen, Claim Your Life.
Okay. And if you have any financial, that financial pyramid of setting yourself up, Jane's advice is just incredible. So I thank you both very much for your time. And we will be anxiously following Jane just to see what your career trajectory goes. We're going to see you down at NSA or some other large speaking summit soon, I'm sure.
Thanks, Scott. It's been a pleasure. We really enjoyed being with you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Cheers to everyone who's listening. Have yourself a great day. We'll catch you again next week.